Welcome to I'd Print That. I'm Andrew.
I'm Joe.
So what'd you do this week, Joe?
This week, I updated my firmware back to the 1.4 version of the M3D software. Played around with that some. Was having more issues with bed leveling, getting quite frustrated with it. Wasn't able to do a whole lot of printing because of that, so I wasn't able to actually successfully get a print of the week that was decent. It's all been warped and misshapen, your typical 3D printing issues. Mm-hmm. I like that I'm back to the new software, but I'm finding some problems with it. It's not as polished as the earlier versions of the 1.4 software, especially when it comes to starting a 3D print. New thing that it's doing is it's finding your bed location, which increases the time it takes when you start a print, and it's also printing out a blob of filament. It's like it's over-priming at this point, so it just leaves a pile of goo on your print bed, which can cause issues with the prints. So I wouldn't recommend it to anybody at this moment.
Yeah, and when we say not polished, the interface looks nice. And at this point, I think they're more concerned about the interface than they are of the real workings of the firmware and software.
Right.
I have a couple sitting here with my print bed because I printed it and it finished right before I came to do the podcast. And I did print them in wood because they are the catapults, and I thought the wood would look kind of nice and give it more of a medieval feel to it. I couldn't. I printed two of the arms that actually have the bucket for the marble. The first one warped horribly.
Well, it's not only warped horribly, but you had X and Y layer shifting.
That was the second one. Actually, this is the first one. And if you look at it, all it did was warp. It didn't shift.
Yeah.
But I still had the problem with where the marble goes. The layers just were not adhering enough. You could probably attribute that to a little bit of it being an exotic filament. It is a wood fill from YS.
Yeah, and it's got a little bit of a... It's not as rigid also on this one.
But I did notice anything I printed in the wood, its tensile strength is not to be desired. And to be expected, it's wood. You're more going for... In my train of thought on the wood filament, I'm looking for the wood look to it. Right. It's not supposed to be anything really... that's going to go into production and used. It's more of a trinket type thing. Like I printed a little cross necklace for my wife for her, so she can put it on a chain and wear it. So it just kind of looked like a wood cross. But yeah, and as Joe just mentioned, the second one I got good adhesion. And actually, if you look here, Joe, on one of the arms, it actually did lift from the wave bonding.
Oh yeah, I see that. We'll get pictures of this up on the site also.
Yeah, we will. But then I did get a layer shift in both the X-axis and the Y-axis about midway through the print. It's quite disheartening. Then you will always run into this with 3D printing. You will run into stuff that just annoys the hell out of you. I also printed out one of the braces, and this actually layer shifted in the X-axis directly after the wave bonding. It finished the print, which I'm very surprised. And it adhered somehow, but it's an unusable part. It has all the functionality like it should, but it's just not there. You couldn't use it because these use actually a dovetail fitting for the cross brace, and the layer shifted inside of that, so can't use it.
Yeah, right near the top of it, near the top where it's about finished.
It was a disheartening week for 3D printing, but such is life and such is 3D printing. You'll have that a lot as you print. Unfortunately for me, I don't think my M3D is long for me. It was a fun little printer to get a hold of.
It's a great introductory machine if you were looking to get into 3D printing. Yeah,
definitely. And Joe and I are to the point now with doing the podcast and trying to crank out the prints of the week. I need to have another good production-sized printer. And I say this as like my DaVinci's up and running because it's not.
Well, it's also, with a lot of the machines... They do a lot better job at bed leveling.
Yes.
It doesn't have it. I had my bed leveled, and it was doing prints last week, and at some point between a print, it just quit. So I updated to the new firmware in hopes that, I would see the improvements that I experienced with the earlier 1.4 software, and somewhere between 1.4.0.6 and 1.4.0.9, they just went away. I am not seeing them, and it's frustrating. I need a printer that's a lot more reliable, and I think some of the bigger machines are that.
And not to say, I mean, everybody will have problems. I mean, my DaVinci by no means is not a big printer. It's a 200 mil cubed build plate, so it'll do 200 in each axis. But it has its issues. You'll have your issues with a Ultimaker, or you'll have your issues with anything. I mean, it's nature of the beast when it comes to printing. It's anything you're trying to do with such a precise layer height, and everything matters, you're going to have problems.
Right.
But for me, the small form factor really kills me.
Mm-hmm.
The big reason I was okay with moving down to such a small printer, as I've said in the past, I mean, the M3D literally fits on my build plate, and my printer could print it. It could print a copy of the cage.
Right.
It's too small. I don't want anybody to think that's listening to this is thinking, oh man, these guys really endorsed M3D in their printer. We still do. They're still a good product. Just for us at this point in time, it's just we've grown out of them.
Right. Speaking of Ultimakers and things like that, I recently got my taxes done, and I've been doing some consideration on a printer to get. I've been kind of leaning towards an Ultimaker, but I think I may be changing. I may go to a machine with a dual extruder.
A DaVinci.
Yeah, actually a DaVinci 2.0 Duo. And I'm also considering a SLA printer. That is, about half the cost of the Ultimaker. So between those two, I would have a little extra funds, and I might get the necessary pieces for the mostly printed CNC machine, but use the laser cutter attachment to it.
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing about that is you can put anything on it. You just, for the most part, even if it's not built, the tool holders aren't hard to model.
That's why it's a modular machine. You can do whatever you want with it. It uses similar files and stuff. If I want a CNC printing head or a cutting head or whatever, I can just throw that on there, and they use the same firmware. They follow the same instructions. It's just whatever task you want to do, you just swap out the head.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and actually I have all the big parts printed for the one we've already spoke on building.
Yeah.
I'd love to continue to print it, but as right now, the DaVinci's down, so I can't. I'm actually looking at reacquiring my old DaVinci from Riley, just for me to have another large format printer.
Right.
And actually, my original idea with having both the DaVincis is I was going to swap one over to a E3D V6 hot end. And that's what I'm kind of looking at doing. I actually just ran through Voltivo. There's a great DaVinci group, and there's enough people on there that are modding printers. They're finding issues and fixing them, and there's a lot of discussion on the DaVincis. They also talk about the Duos for Joe.
Right.
Because then we found out tonight that he can swap it over to Repetier just as my 1.0A is.
Right. Yeah, so I'm not stuck with the DaVinci proprietary
filaments
and other things.
Yeah, filament's the big one, because their filament just like we've said before, just lacks.
I think that pretty much does it for prints and maintenance and other things. At least the stuff in the news has been better than what we've been experiencing.
Yeah, we found a lot of cool information.
Yeah, last week we talked about how the Air Force approved a 3D printed part for their AWACS.
Yeah.
Just a little armrest cap. Well, looking a little bit more, they're investing into 3D printed engine development. This is for rockets.
Rockets with freaking laser beams.
Exactly. As we said last week, the Air Force has been looking into 3D printed solutions to lower costs and reduce dependency on foreign-made parts.
Which is awesome.
When I say foreign-made parts, most of the parts that they're acquiring are Russian-made. So they're trying to bring that back domestically. Through a total of 10 awards under the Booster Propulsion Technology Maturation Board Agency Announcement, or BAA as they call it, program, the Air Force is supporting technological developments that will not only optimize propulsion systems, but it will also make them less dependent on these foreign-made systems, and it will reduce risks for the domestic industry. Which it's cool that they are looking at that, because that means they are going to be dumping more of these funds into, U.S. manufacturers than they are into Russian manufacturers, and it just helps the economy.
Yeah, local economy for us. I mean, not to say local is where we live, but local is in the U.S.
Right.
We have nothing. We don't want anybody to think we have a problem with the U.S. outsourcing projects to different countries. It is what it is. But if we can be self-fulfilling in any way, it's better.
Right. So the final awards of the program, they were announced here on the 27th of January, and they're all focused on areas of material manufacturing and into development. The awards total came out to $34.6 million, and they started handing those out on November 4th.
Nice.
It's nice to see that they're continuing to invest in 3D printing.
Yeah.
In addition to the Air Force continuing down the 3D printed path, the U.S. Army is also doing something kind of cool with their soldiers' diets.
Kind of cool. This is awesome.
Yeah, actually very cool. And so research is at the Army Soldier Research Development and Engineering Center in Natick, Massachusetts. They're working on a way of syncing wearable technology with 3D printing that will provide soldiers the exact nutritional sustenance they need while they're deployed. Mm-hmm. They expect within the next 10 to 15 years, soldiers could be outfitted with wearable technology that measures their physiology and can relay that data to a system that will assess what a soldier needs to eat. So if a soldier is running on little sleep, the technology may determine a need for caffeine, and the 3D printing system could then also create a product to cater that soldier's needs, be it a protein bar or some kind of powder, taking into account their baseline physiology and caloric intake. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much would be customized right down to
it's their exact
specific
caloric intake,
needs.
Everything.
Yep.
And Joe's had some experience with MREs, and as have I. I'm not a big fan of them.
I'm all right with MREs. I had a funny thing happen. My friend Gary and I, we were in this garage cleaning up all these boxes that had just been left in there. And under this pile of boxes that was kind of damp and had been sitting there for a while, we found 2 MREs unopened. MREs...
They never expire.
They never expire. They are supposed to be good for anything. So we found them and we're like, cool. Wiped them down. They were still sealed, no punctures, no holes. We cut them open and we had a nice little lunch there. So it was, it was nice. It was MREs aren't that bad. They're not terrible.
Yeah, I've only had a few, mostly hunting. Guys bring them hunting because they're easy to pack. I like a lot of things. I mean, Joe and I were speaking before this. I like Spam. I would eat and buy Spam. Not because I needed to or it's easy to pack. I mean, I like it. Tastes good. But, I don't do MREs.
I haven't had Spam in ages.
It's good stuff. Spam
and
eggs, man.
If you go to an Army-Navy store, you cannot find whole MREs. They break them down into individual components now.
Yeah, a lot of people for packing like the single components rather than the full meals.
I would rather have the full meals because it comes in, it's sealed. It is, if you get, in a situation and your pack gets drenched, it's not going to soak through that cardboard or through anything else and actually risk damaging or spoiling that food. Yeah. It's sealed.
The whole chemical reaction thing in them that heats them up kind of weirds me out too.
Oh, the little Pelletier chips they got or whatever they are? I actually have a first aid kit that I have some of those.
Oh, the chips from the MREs?
You can actually buy those in little canisters individually.
No, really?
They come like 5 a canister, and they're kind of cool. You just put them on the ground, put a little light to them, and like a little flame, and they'll burn for a while, and they get really hot. You can cook with them, do whatever you need to do.
Oh, yeah, but you could do a lot of things, but it's not suggested.
Well, that's off-label. We don't go off-label.
Yeah, that's true.
But That's pretty much all that I saw that was really cool as far as newsworthy items. Was the two things on the military.
Yeah.
So it's definitely
It's gaining
their
traction.
interest. Yes, and their interest shows that there's more to it than trinkets.
Yeah, and that's a big part of, and we spoke on it before. I mean, you'll get a 3D printer, and you're not gonna lie, you're gonna print every little trinket you ever wanted. But then you'll start to get into usable items, and that's when 3D printing really shines. Is because I don't know. One of the main selling points I did to my wife when I told her I wanted to buy a 3D printer was, how many plastic things have you bought that broke?
Right.
And she's like, wow, that's a pretty good argument.
Well,
And, you can just recreate it, redo it, fix it. And everything that's a commodity in this world, most of the time it's plastic.
Right.
Because it's easy to break, and it's for the most part cheap enough to go buy a new one. But I grew up very thrifty, and going out and buying the new one wasn't always a thing. You made do with what you had.
and I have a trash can. It's got a little motion sensor on it, and it has a little actuating lid.
Yeah.
And here recently, one of the plastic parts in it broke. So I took the unit apart, found a broken piece, and I actually have both halves of that piece sitting on my desk, and I'm going to take it and measure it out, design it up in a piece of CAD software, and print out a replacement part.
You know what a lot of people do with that?
Throw them away.
No, well, that too. But for recreating a part, is they'll glue that part back together and scan it on
Right.
like a bed scanner. So then you don't really have to worry about dimensions. You're granted, yes, if it has any parts that are built up, you're going to have to build those and configure those. But it's a lot easier to start with your platform of the part.
Yeah.
So
I have a flatbed scanner, so it'd be easy enough for me just to kind of slap that in the flatbed scanner, scan it as an image, and import it. But I'd still have to make sure that my width and depth.
But then you have your piece.
Yeah.
You have the base part.
Sure. Yeah, and I can just it'd be kind of like what I did with the I'd print that logo that I made a 3D model of. Just make lines around the outside, and then.
Did you just push pull on that, or?
Yeah, pretty much push pulled. Once I got the outline done, I cut it up into the different layers, and then just push pulled on it until I had the different heights that I wanted.
Yeah. And that's with
SketchUp.
SketchUp. That
Yep.
you're using that. That's push pull is a SketchUp command. There's a similar thing in Tinkercad, which I use a lot more than SketchUp. But
And that's it. Kind of comes down into when you get to that point, you've printed all of your trinkets and things like that. Try and make something. That's kind of the cool thing is, like we say at the end of the show, if you can imagine it, you can print it. Dream something up. Open up your CAD software and just go to town. There's no wrong way to do it.
No.
You're going to learn this stuff by playing with it. And if you're really interested about stuff like that, there are free tutorials on things like this.
yeah, the how to design your first 3D project without tears. We'll link to that on the site and in the typed form in the blog.
Yeah, and that's actually watch that video tutorial, and it's actually pretty cool. The guy uses 123D Design. It's an Autodesk product. You can get it right off their website.
And that's free, isn't it?
Yes, it is a free product. It doesn't have a lot of the features that SketchUp has, but it at least gets you familiar with using CAD software and working in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
And
mind you, AutoCAD is cumbersome.
yeah,
I haven't personally used the 123D, and the main reason I said it's free was people like me that deal with AutoCAD for work every day. I know how much my CAD program costs.
yeah, and it's
Freaking spendy.
yeah, it's hundreds of dollars.
I use AutoCAD Lite right now, and it was $2,000 for the license.
Oh, so okay, a few $100.
Yeah, and I generally use AutoCAD Map. I don't really need it. AutoCAD Map for me generally is geospatially correct drawing,
Right.
and it's not such a big deal with us right now. But an AutoCAD Lite is a very slimmed down. AutoCAD Maps up in the $5,000 to $6,000 range, but it's awesome to see that Autodesk is actually putting out products that consumers can grab and not spend a ton of money on.
And they've got a ton. It's like, well, Tinkercad is Autodesk also.
Yep.
And they also have software you can do 3D models with if you take pictures.
Yes,
you can make 3D
you
models.
can import the pictures in, yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about building a little 3D scanner here in a few moments, because that's a kind of cool little product, but I don't want to jump ahead.
No, don't jump ahead.
We're also going to link to a couple other things on the blog, so if you're looking at finding out the basics of 3D printing, if you're new to this, you want to learn a little about the technology, learn how to set up a printer, etc. Allison, they offer free online courses. They've got a how to use a 3D printer class. It does just that. Teaches you the basics of 3D printing. The course takes about 2 to 3 hours. I started going through it earlier today. It's put on by Microsoft, it looks like.
Oh, nice.
So it's a couple of guys from Microsoft sitting around talking about 3D printing technologies.
Not death by PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's not death by PowerPoint, thankfully. It is all video. I plan on going through and finishing it just to kind of see what it's like. They do offer an actual certificate at the end of the course. So
cool.
You have a nice little piece of paper or a virtual certificate that you can display. But not only do they do the 3D printing thing, they also offer other courses anywhere from law to Photoshop that if you want to learn a little bit more for your job or just get a little bit extra training, you can do so at no cost. And those also include certificates of completion.
Oh, that's cool. And another thing, I mean, into us pushing for people to get it, to come out of your little box and get into making your own things, is how many times have you bought something and went, man, if it had this, it could be so much better because it fits what my needs are.
Right.
Not that it's a bad product, but if I could adjust this one thing to where it fits. My biggest problem with things, I have huge hands, and for me to hold small things, it sucks. Mm-hmm. And especially plastic things. And I have gorilla hands. I was an underground equipment operator, ditch digger forever. They're not finesse fingers at all. But so many things I've been like, man, I wish I could make this just a little bit better. And you can with 3D printing.
Right.
If you can unscrew that part from the product that you're trying to make better, you can 3D print a new one.
Yeah, if you have an item you're like, man, I wish this had a bigger handle on it, or I wish this had a little shroud over this piece, or some other hack or modification, take out your calipers, do some measurements, and design it.
Yeah.
It's
And
not difficult. Speaking
on calipers, that's number one thing with 3D printing, along with I really highly recommend going and getting a hobby knife set and a set of jeweler files. A good set of digital calipers will be irreplaceable in your 3D printing.
And they don't cost much. You can go to Lowe's, Home Depot, a hobby shop, and pick those up for $25.
Yeah, I picked mine up from Harbor Freight. They were under $10.
Yeah.
And I have 2 sets of them. They work fine. A lot of people are very against Harbor Freight products. I'm of the mindset where if I can buy one for a quarter of the price of the expensive one, I can still buy 3 more before I bought the expensive one.
Right. You're going to get the same measurement. It's not like it's going to be in some foreign measurement. It's in millimeters or inches. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and I've actually measured stuff against your set that I think you got from Lowe's.
No, Home Depot.
Home Depot, and they're spot on.
Yeah.
And you'll use it a lot, even if you're not modeling your own stuff, just in calibrating your printer.
Yeah, bed leveling, big time.
You print a test cube, you need to know that your printer's printing that size of test cube. And also checking your filament. Mm-hmm. I randomly go through at random points, not just I pulled some filament off the spool. As I'm printing with filament, I'll run my calipers down what's exposed to check my tolerances on my filament, just to make sure. So if I have a problem with a print, I'm not chasing down problems in my printer and potentially ruining my calibration because I'm running into in discrepancies with my filament.
Yeah, not all filament is made the same.
No, it's not.
Not created equally. If you look when I bought my Hatchbox filament, my blue and my glow-in-the-dark filament, it's a 1.75, but it has a variation of 0.05 plus or minus. Mm-hmm. So that means it can be as big as 1.8 or as thin as 1.7.
Those kind of tolerances are fine.
Right.
Those will not affect your print. You're not going to under and over extrude with that. Anything over that, you're going to start to see problems.
Yeah, your feeder gear is not going to be able to grab it and feed it into the print head, or it'll get jammed up.
Yeah, and beyond that, even if it doesn't have a problem running it through the extruder, your printer it's not smart.
No.
It's just G-code, as we've talked before. It doesn't know that it only extruded X amount.
Right, yeah, it's not going to be able to tell you that area of the filament had more material in it and spit out this big blob.
Or under extrude,
right,
to where it's going to leave
gaps
and weak points in your prints.
Yep.
So yeah, definitely pick up a pair of calipers. They're indispensable in this hobby. And like when I said grab them from Harbor Freight, this hobby can be expensive. We can sit here and go, oh, well, we could be elitist and say, oh, you need to go and buy a $120 pair of digital calipers. And no.
Whatever you can afford.
Whatever you can afford is fine. My hobby knife set, as well as my jeweler files, bought them from Harbor Freight. But yeah, I mean, there's a few key things that you're going to need. And we've spoke on most of them. An X-Acto knife is a good one, mostly just for pulling prints off the bed.
X-Acto knife or some kind of like art palette.
Yes,
or
a palette scraper.
Palette scraper, yeah. And you normally use those, for using modeling clays and things like that in art. But you get a nice thin one, you can kind of scooch under the edge of a print, and it's rigid enough to just give it a little bit of a twist and can lift your print right off your print bed.
Now, as we say this, don't go blaming us when you go and grab your wife's palette scraper and use it for 3D printing.
And she screams at you. My wife would have my head on a stick if I did that. I have my own set of tools.
You do not go into the art room.
Especially if you want blue tape.
Oh.
Ooh, too soon?
Too soon? Know. Did you get in trouble?
I got blamed for making a mess in her art room, when in actuality, the blue tape was just sitting on a table, and I removed it from the table.
Oh. But you entered the room. Guilty by association.
Yes, I entered the room, therefore it is my fault.
Everything's your fault.
So, going through lately, I have been watching Craigslist, looking for inexpensive 3D printers, because people do get in this hobby, and they find that it's not for them, or
I got them addicted to Craigslist. That's what happened.
Or they find that there's an inexpensive 3D printer and they get it for their kids.
Yeah, and that's what we ran into.
Recently, we found the CTC printer over in Richland, down by Kennewick. Upon messaging the guy back and forth, found out that he bought it for his kids. Now, I saw something cool online, actually, just before we started doing the podcast, about a month ago, actually. It's hard to imagine that we've been doing this a month now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's a ebook series on 3D printing for kids, and it goes through the use of CAD Software. It's available on Scribd.com, and it is by Peter Phelps.
No
right
relation
now,
to Michael Phelps.
Correct, yes. No relation to Michael Phelps. Well, could. That's just an assumption, though.
It was just being funny.
So the author anticipates that there's going to be 10 volumes available. Right now, there are 4 volumes, and they cover topics like robots, pendants, personalized 3D text, and converting images into 3D objects. You can read them for free online. I actually have gone through a couple of them. Their first 2 are like 102 pages, I think they would come out to be. And if you want to buy them to download, it's only $1.99 per book.
Yeah, not bad at all.
No, especially if he keeps it up and all 10 volumes are over 100 pages. That's over 1,000 pages for $20.
Yeah, and the reason we're trying to endorse this is because it's great this person thought of 3D printing for his kids.
Right.
But unfortunately, probably what had happened was he said, here's a 3D printer, play with it. And there's a lot more to 3D printing than that.
Right.
I mean, you can't just grab a printer out of the box, and especially these CTCs, because I've looked into them for picking up another printer, and I've really wanted a dual extruder. For me, it's printing with hips and ABS, because limonene dissolves hips and won't touch the ABS, so you don't have to worry about breaking support material off.
Yes.
But, I mean, I looked into this printer, and I already know of 5 different mods you pretty much must have that you need to do to these printers to make them worth their salt. Now, these printers are actually a MakerBot replicator knockoff.
Right.
They're very, very similar. They look the same, and I don't want to.
They cost about a quarter the price, though.
Yeah, they're $400, brand new.
Right.
And I don't want to say knockoff as this is a cheap printer, you shouldn't get it. I'm meaning somebody replicated a MakerBot.
It's got the look of a MakerBot.
Yeah, and it doesn't have the steel frame. It's MDF, laser cut MDF. That's the frame, which is fine. I mean, the Ultimaker 1 was an MDF framed printer.
The first MakerBots were MDF.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm still looking into trying to talk this guy out of it. I'm a big barter person. I love bartering. Mostly because if I don't spend money, I can't get in trouble for spending money on my hobbies.
I'm in the same boat. If I can sell things or trade things, then it's fair game. If I have to make any large purchases, then we plan it out and we make sure that we're not going to mess up our finances.
Yeah, and I always feel guilty. I mean, I have kids, and I always want my kids to have the best they can have. And if Dad's going out and buying a $1,200 3D printer, I would feel bad because I could spend that money on my kids. But if it's stuff I've already spent money on and I don't need it anymore, I have no problem trading it for a new hobby, a new toy.
Like a GoPro for a laser.
Like a GoPro for a laser engraver, which I need to play with more. Haven't had a lot of time to play with it. I actually wiped the little laptop I have that used to run that drove the DaVinci. Now, since the DaVinci's down, there's no real need for it, so I wiped it, put a brand new brand new Windows 10 on it, and it's just sitting there. I haven't touched it. Actually, my wife kind of absconded with it, and it was her laptop in the beginning, and now she's kind of figured out that it works better now because I fixed it, and for some reason it's hers again.
So I saw a couple of cool little items here the last couple of days to really increase the things that you can do with a 3D printer. One of the big things when you do 3D prints, especially if you're doing a lot of the same thing, is the time it takes to print the object. Mm-hmm. Especially if you need 3 or 4 or 5 dozen of them, it takes a while. Mm-hmm. There's an Indiegogo campaign. It just started. They're trying to raise $25,000. It is a product they call the Mini Maker. It is an injection molding kit. They have a couple of versions of it. One is a manual injection where you have a syringe and you inject the plastic yourself. Mm-hmm. Or they have an automated version which it has a motor and it closes up the 2 halves, it fills it, opens it back up, spits it out, and can continue. Kind of a cool little device, actually.
That's really cool. I mean, a lot of companies are 3D printing their concepts, and then they'll send off to get their molds made upon that concept. And injection molding, I mean...
And making those molds is not cheap. I mean, you got to send off to get those made, and it's thousands of dollars and the time it takes. If you have that piece of hardware sitting on a table in your shop or in your office, you can actually just take your print. They've got this little thing where you actually take your STL file, import their design into it, and it makes the negative for the mold.
Oh, really?
The mold halves, you fill it, or you put that into the plate. You fill the plate where the template was, and then remove the template, and you get your 2 halves.
Really?
Yep, and then when you close it, you inject it, and it's pretty awesome. As of this morning, they have had 0 backers. They're looking for $25,000.
Now, this is something I could really enjoy getting into, is injection molding.
Oh, yeah, especially at, the machine, the automatic machine costs for just not their large format, just a normal format, they're looking at what? $800-900. Mm-hmm. It's definitely well worth the investment.
Yeah, and if you can get into, like you said, it just released on Indiegogo, and it currently has no backers. The early bird specials are amazing.
Yeah.
One of the big pushes for me, I love fishing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make my own soft plastic baits.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to make molds and do injection molding for making my own baits.
Mm-hmm.
And this would make that super easy.
You can even do your own lures.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, a lot of people actually there's a lot of actually models out there, but making your own custom one and injection molding is much faster for production.
Yeah, I think this guy's out of South Africa, I think is what it was saying.
Okay.
But it will ship
Durban.
worldwide.
Yep. And its expected delivery dates looks like across the board July of 2016. So that's this year. I mean, it looks like as soon as he gets the backing, which is probably just for production of the product.
Right.
It looks like he's got most of the quirks worked out.
And there's video of it actually working. I mean,
Yeah.
He's got functioning versions of it. So
Yeah, and if you want to take a look at it, we'll link this Indiegogo campaign on the blog.
right in the blog. So in addition to the injection molding, the other part of that for manufacturing is 3D scanning.
Yes.
Now, I saw a little instructable on how to build your own Arduino-powered desktop 3D scanner for $50. Now, there's a caveat to this. It's $50 for the electronics for the Arduino and the stepping motor and the LED. You have to have your own DSLR camera with a wireless shutter.
Okay.
It requires you to have that ahead of time.
Okay.
DSLR cameras aren't cheap. They're
No.
$600,000 depending upon what you have. But I was just saying the five ingredients that you need is an Arduino, stepper motor driver, the stepper motor, an IR LED, and an LCD shield.
Now I'm taking it the stepper motor is spinning the plate.
The plate or the object.
Okay. Yeah, because when you do a 3D scan, you want full 360 scan.
Correct.
Of everything, so you get the whole model.
Yeah, so when it's set up and you have your subject lit, what the 3D scanner does is it takes that stepper motor, which is controlled by the Arduino board, and it will turn the object a fixed amount. It'll use the IR LED to trigger the shutter on the camera, and it'll keep repeating that process until all photos from all angles have been collected. Once the photos have been collected, you'll then take and use some photogrammetry software, either Agisoft PhotoScan or even Autodesk Memento or Autodesk's 123D Catch. Those are paid versions, light versions, free versions. On their instructables page, they took a wood screw and they blew this wood screw up to where it was had a 6-inch diameter head on it.
Really?
It was enormous, and it looked really, really good. Yeah, and you're not limited to the DSLR camera, because what they did is the guy used Sebastian Sense's multi-camera IR control library, and it should work with virtually any brand of camera that has an IR remote. And it has been tested to use the Nikon DSLRs. That's what they used in the test on the instructables page.
Okay.
And my wife has a Nikon DSLR camera.
Nice.
So I might actually give this a try.
Heck yeah.
If you go to the site, which is linked off of our blog, it is kind of a cool little instructable. It doesn't take much.
And beyond that, if you're not looking to spend $50, there's also an instructable on creating a 3D scanner out of an Xbox 360 Kinect.
I went, and one of the first purchases I did when I got my M3D is I ran to GameStop and bought a 360 Kinect for like $25. It was super inexpensive, works pretty decently, but you need the software to run it. And there's a little bit of playing around with drivers and stuff like that to really get it to work. It's not just a pull out of the box and plug it in like a 3D printer type thing. It takes tweaking, and there's some trial and error. So earlier at the top of the show, we were talking about wood filament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have found two new types of things. One is a ceramic-based.
Actually, we've talked about this. I think episode 1 or 2 we talked about the ceramic filament.
Yeah, there's a company, Teton 3D. They've created a new 3D printing resin that is available for SLA, DLP, and other UV-based 3D printers. Once it's all printed, you can kiln fire these items, and they become 100% porcelain. You can do glazing and other finishes, a whole 9 yards on them. It's kind of cool. Porcelain's pretty tough, kind of fragile.
Very heat resistant.
Very heat resistant.
And I've used porcelain because I have one of my endeavors and hobbies that I got into at one point was I built a forge. I like blacksmithing. Very zen for me. But in building my forge, I of course had to melt things because I have a really hot fire.
Right.
Porcelain is really good for molds.
Yeah.
Porcelain and terracotta both can withstand huge amounts of heat and not break. Granted, you can't cool them down fast.
No, it's pretty much like with a kiln. It goes in, it gradually heats, it stays hot for a long time, and then it gradually cools.
Yeah.
You can't just take it out of the kiln and leave it even at room temp to cool.
Or quench it.
Yeah, or quenching it, yeah. It's got to be a controlled cool.
Yeah, and a lot of people using forged crucibles. That speaks to me in more than the 3D printing world, because for a crucible, for printing, one thing that I really want to do is there's a filament out there now that's made for lost wax casting that has a 100% melt out rate that leaves no residue. So I really wanted to do was make my wife upgraded wedding rings.
Right.
We plan to renew our vows at one point, and I think one of the best gifts you can give is something that you made.
Right.
And if I can make my wife's ring, that would be amazing. If I 3D modeled it myself, I printed it, and then poured it in whatever precious metal I'd choose. But to do that, you need a crucible that can withstand that. Currently, I melt aluminum. I melt down cans and make aluminum muffins. I used to scrap a lot.
Right.
And having giant bags of cans is just... it's a pain in the butt. So
when you can just go rather than a big bag of cans, you melt it down, you just hand them an ingot. Here's a block of aluminum. Give me money, please.
Granted that there's melting down aluminum, you get a lot of what they call in casting any kind of metal. It's called dross, impurities in the metal, and generally it floats to the top, and you skim it off. And most scrapyards are very timid on taking something you cast yourself, because you can take aluminum, pour a little bit, throw a couple pieces of steel in there, and pour it on top, and how are you going to know it's a melted piece?
Right.
So what I generally did was I cut
them in half.
I cut them in half so they can see that it's pure aluminum. I'm a little off subject of 3D printing, but this is just showing how 3D printing can just morph into so many things in your life.
Right.
A filament that I can pour my own crucibles, I can pour and then print my own molds for the ring.
Yep.
It's irreplaceable.
And this project is currently on Kickstarter. They were looking to raise $5,000,
which is not
to
much.
make the jump from conception to production, and as of this morning, they had over 8.
That's awesome. I love seeing that.
This would be one of the reasons that I will pick up a SLA printer, because having the ability to at least get the pre-porcelain figure, the non-fired porcelain figure. Gizmo has a kiln.
Yes, they do.
That they can fire porcelain with.
And once again, if you haven't listened to previous episodes, Gizmo is our most local makerspace.
Right.
They're in a town that's 10 minutes away from where Joe and I live. And there's also another one in Spokane, Washington, which is very, very close to us. It's a 20-minute drive for us.
Yeah, we're right between two.
Yeah, but Gizmo's our closest makerspace. We actually plan to do a collab with them and do an episode on site at Gizmo. We've spoken with them, and they're very open to the idea of doing a podcast with them. For us, seeing a makerspace pop up here, we live in a very old part of the country. I put my 3D printer on Craigslist, and I literally got calls asking me what a 3D printer is. And
it's not like an inkjet printer that, just prints out objects that look three-dimensional.
Yeah, so that was kind of funny. And actually, the guy that runs it is not a young guy. He's an older dude.
Him and his wife used to manufacture IMAX movie projectors. They have been in the tech industry for a while, and they had an opportunity to do this, and they jumped. They are a nonprofit, and we're excited to have them around. back to the 3D printing filament, one other new filament that's coming out, 3DOM USA, they are releasing a new bio-based filament made from hemp. This product that they launched called Entwined is an eco-friendly hemp-based 3D filament. Hemp has been around for quite a while and has been used since the 18th century to manufacture things like wax, rope, twine, cloth, paper, and even fuel. Mm-hmm. So it's a very versatile plant.
Much beyond being a stoner.
Correct, yes. Much beyond its more notorious side, it's got plenty of other uses. Entwined is made from industrial hemp, and compared to corn crops, which are often used in PLA filaments, hemp grows denser and does not require the herbicides or pesticides, making it a more ecological option for manufacturing purposes. Additionally, the company claims that the new material stands up against PLA materials in both quality and ease of prints.
That's awesome.
You're not stuck with just corn products, though smelling waffles is kind of nice, or pancakes with syrups is very nice.
And don't go thinking this is going to make it smell like you've hotboxed your room where your printer's in.
No. It's going to make it smell like you've probably burnt some hemp rope or hemp wax. It's probably going to have a completely different odor. Hemp is non-intoxicating. It's, you're not going to get a buzz off it or anything like that. Entwined is actually the third product launched as part of 3DOM's partnership with a North Dakota-based biocomposites company, C2 Renew. As of this moment, the companies have developed some truly unique bio-based sustainable 3D printing filaments, which include a coffee-based filament called Wound Up and a beer-based printing filament called Buzzed.
Actually, they're not the first for coffee. Protopasta. We'll link their site. He creates some really cool filament. He's got a coffee scented. He's got a pine scented. He also does really cool. He does steel filaments. He does carbon fiber reinforced filaments. He's got a lot of really cool stuff.
Now, are they just scented? Because these are actually coffee based.
Yeah, I believe his are just scented.
So yeah, coffee-based and beer-based. So these actually have, I would imagine coffee grounds and probably hops and other things in the beer.
Oh, that would be cool. I love the smell of hops.
So it'd be interesting to see if we can get our hands on some. Check that out. But in addition to what they've done there with that partnership with C2 Renew, 3DOM has also developed a popular glass-filled PLA that they released in early 2015.
Yes, and actually I've seen that. A guy we follow on Instagram, Embedded Junkie, has printed with this filament, and it is the closest to a clear filament. Generally, when you buy, and ABS really doesn't even hold a candle to the PLA, and they call it a natural, it's more opaque. It's not really see-through. I mean, you can see the shadow of your hand behind it, but it's not clear. Now, this stuff is next to clear, almost like an SLA or DLP printer puts out. It's cool. I like that. Also, looking at their markup, and their printing is a lot cooler. Temp-wise, it looks like their prints are going between 180 and 210 Celsius. The starting print that I start with in PLA is generally around 215 on the M3D.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the M3D does print a little hotter than most PLA, and I like to print PLA a little hotter to reduce the stringiness in my prints. But, I mean, that's cool to see that. It's less power consumption, less wear and tear on the heater in your hot end, as well as your thermistor.
And it doesn't require heated bed. Heated bed is optional like your PLA. So anything that pretty much prints PLA will be able to print this. It's been tested on MakerBot, Lulzbot, and FlashForge. Those are just some of the bigger names out there, but there's no reason why this shouldn't work in a DaVinci or M3D either.
Yeah. And granted, they are a little spendy. It looks like you're looking at a kilogram spool for $59. But if you're looking at any of the exotic filaments, I mean, you go to buy a spool of Ninja Flex, that stuff's spendy.
Yeah.
Wood fill's really expensive. That's why I've been hoarding I have 2 spools of wood filament, and I don't print in it much because I don't have much of it, and I don't want to buy it because I know my DaVinci can't print it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, $59.
And depending upon what kind of production they get into, hemp is a very fast-growing plant, so they should be able to bring that price down once they have more materials. I think this is just kind of your introduction into this. And if they've got a high demand, I would imagine
they'll be able to bring
that price down when they crank up manufacturing.
Yeah, and if you're looking into buying this filament, you already have taken the leap into an exotic filament, and you know what you're getting into.
Right.
You know you're getting into a filament that you're going to have to fiddle with temps, fiddle with adhesion, fiddle with everything to make it work. And,
yes.
I mean, 1 kilogram spool is generally half of what you normally buy, and it's 1 times the price of a 2 kilogram spool of ABS or PLI.
Right.
Which is not bad.
Yeah, and the last thing on 3DOM USA is they have another new filament that they expect to be released at some point made from switchgrass. So it's another bio-based filament. The switchgrass filament should be available in April of this year.
Yeah.
That pretty much covers 3D printing news. I wanted to touch base real quick. There's been a game that I've had my eye on for a while. It started out about a year ago on Kickstarter, and it's called Dead by Daylight. It's kind of along the lines of Evolve, if you're familiar with it, where you have one bad guy and 4 other guys trying to survive. In the case of Evolve, where you've got 4 hunters and a monster. The monster is trying to kill the hunters are trying to kill the monster. Well, this takes the idea of the slasher horror flick that you'd see in the 1980s, like your Halloween's, your Friday the 13th, and your Nightmare on Elm Streets, and brings it to a video game format where you have 4 players. I think they're your stereotypical, your jock, your cheerleader, your nerd type, and there's one other I can't recall off the top of my head, but they're trying to survive the evening or escape the location that they're in from a crazed, unstoppable killer. It's kind of a cool concept. But I've been looking forward to this game, actually. So when I saw it pop up on Steam with a coming soon tag, I got really excited. I would like to get involved in a game with this. The idea is, like the slasher horror flicks, like take Friday the 13th, for instance. You have Jason Voorhees, who is chasing down campers and magically can, while he's slower than his victims, he will show up at places much faster than they will. So if he's chasing them out of a cabin and they run across a complex and go into a shed, he is either in the shed or will be at the shed within moments. So the way that they are accomplishing this, at least when I was watching their Kickstarter, is the killer, the villain, the bad guy, can despawn, become basically ethereal, go through walls, can spy on the players, and moves at extremely fast speeds. But the only time where they can actually respawn as themselves is when they're not in sight of the players. So they have to be in a room or around a corner or someplace where they cannot be spotted. It can get the players really paranoid because they don't know where you're going to be as the killer. That's the one game that I've been looking forward to. Other than that, Diablo 3.
Yeah, the main reason I didn't print a lot this week was Diablo 3. I got heavy into Season 5 of Diablo 3. I've created Charge Barb. I got a really good roll on some gear, and I have the potential to be on the leaderboards, and I'd really love to be. Having a lot of fun. Generally, I play with a couple guys from work, and I end up getting carried throughout the whole season, and I just kind of play for fun, just to play, and now I can blow through just about anything Diablo can throw at me.
Yeah, and we talked last week about me not getting Diablo invites. Well, I finally got my Diablo invites, and I'm ranked up. I've got myself a Crusader named Jericho, and she is at Paragon level 151 at this moment, and I'm working on a Thorns build.
Yeah, I'm at Paragon 384, I believe.
Something like that, yeah.
But I was playing pretty hardcore. I mean, I wasn't going to bed till 2 o'clock in the morning. Not recommended. But yeah, that's the big reason I haven't printed much. And there will be times that I don't. If I get hooked on a game, 3D printing is definitely a hobby of mine, but gaming's been a hobby of mine much longer. This podcast is also about everything. I mean, everything that we do. So, I mean, gaming really will work its way into it a lot more points, and sometimes it'll be more about 3D printing and less about gaming. And then sometimes it'll even be more about just tech. Let's say we bought a new toy and we want to talk about it. I bought that laser engraver and haven't played with it much, so I don't have a lot to say about it. But there will be a point in time where I do talk about it more. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with Diablo. They revamped a few things with the set dungeons. That's kind of fun. Pain in the butt, but it's fun. So I've been having a lot of fun with it, and for lack of a better term, I've been neglecting 3D printing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and also we ran into the problems. I mean, my DaVinci's down, and I haven't acquired all the parts. I'm still pondering what I want to do to it. Joe and I both looked into a new power supply for it and what to put in it. They do come with it was a server power supply, correct?
Yeah, it's an ATX style power supply. It's not your standard desktop ATX though. It's a little bit smaller. I've got a couple of 1U rack mount servers that have 260 watt power supplies. Mm-hmm. I know online some of the individuals there, they've been using 320 watts, but I would need to see what you have, because we may just, if it's less than 100, if it's less than 260 watt, we might just be able to use this and upgrade your system.
But and also what we're going to look at doing is doing a full ATX size styled power supply and just mounting it externally, mostly for heat dissipation issues. There's been a couple of people that I've seen mention the stepper motor drivers getting warm because the exhaust from the power supply blows kind of right on the board. And I'm not opposed to having the power supply on the outside. I can print a enclosure for it and just mount it to the outside of the box. My printer's not going back to XYZ, so I'm not worried about...
it's probably out of warranty by now.
Yeah, just a little bit. So I'm not really worried about warrantying it or having heavily modified it. Also looking into doing a ramps setup rather than using their little... I wouldn't say chintzy board. It's a little on the cheap side. Just I like the Arduino boards. They're tried and true. I mean, all of RepRaps have used them. And a lot of people are doing the board upgrades. There's not a lot, but it gives you a little more control. Those stepper drivers are a little more precise.
Right.
And if I do get my old DaVinci back, there's a really good chance I'm going to swap out the hot ends, as I've mentioned at the top of the podcast, and have one that can do exotics, filaments, and the other one just to do ABS for production style printing. Overwatch, it's another game Blizzard's going to put out.
It's in beta right now, right?
I think they closed the beta. They're looking at you can already pre-order it, so I think it's a late fall release along with their new WoW expansion. Mm-hmm. It's a TF2 if you ever played Team Fortress 2 on Steam. And actually, Team Fortress 2 was in the Team Fortress was an orange box, I believe.
No, Xbox. I think it was 2.
Oh, was it 2?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you played that on console, Team Fortress 2 is kind of its own arena, but yeah, I have fun with TF2.
It's a heavily modded version of the Half-Life multiplayer.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also Counter-Strike-esque too.
Yes.
Which I'm not a huge fan of Counter-Strike, but I like TF2. It's more cartoony, and you can play it for fun, and if you want to get good at it, there's a lot of technique that goes into it.
Right.
But the Overwatch looks fun to me. For the most part, their open beta was streamers, Twitch TV guys, YouTubers, which a lot of gaming companies are going towards rather than just having an open beta to everybody to try out. Because I would imagine mostly because people played the beta and didn't give a lot of feedback, and they're really needing the feedback. That's the whole point of a beta.
Well, and I'm a little old school when it comes to like beta testing and things like that, because anymore people want to get into beta testing for early access. Mm-hmm. And that's not what beta testing is. It's about finding problems with the game, communicating with the developer, and getting those problems taken care of. Yeah. And mass open betas, that's genuinely stress testing. Most of the little bugs and stuff have been worked out. There's a chance that new things will be found by a different pair of eyes. I would rather see betas go back to what they were. It's not for publicity. It's not for hype. It's fix your problems, make a solid game, and release it.
Yeah. Well, and if you've noticed, a lot of Steam games are going the whole early access thing. I've gotten burned on a few of those games that looked awesome, and they just kind of went, we made more money on just doing this, and we would actually lose money to produce the game further.
Right.
And for the most part, I mean, they're making their sales goals just in the early access games.
Well, what was that you were playing?
Ark.
Ark, yeah.
Ark, and actually, I didn't get burned by Ark. Ark is fun. Just there's nobody really got interested in it in our little world of gaming to play with, and I'm very much even as being an introvert, I'm very much a social gamer. I like to play with my friends. It's more fun to me. Diablo is a lot more fun if you're playing with somebody.
Yeah. When if you're soloing and you're in a dungeon killing monsters, it's repetitive.
Very.
If you're with friends and you're joking around and you're more than eyes on the prize, then it can be entertaining, quite entertaining.
At that point, you can just look at the game as being a medium for hanging out with your friends.
Yeah.
And for gamers, introverted engineer gamers, hanging out with our friends, unfortunately, and as sad as it may seem, is still talking on Vent. That's hanging out to us.
Yep. Yeah, it's still web chat.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so much cooler online.
Yeah, you are.
Dick. So, next week's print of the week, we looked at a few things we haven't really decided on much.
I would like to extend the Siege.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Because I want to get it printed. I don't want to give up on this one. I think it'll be fun, and extending it out another week at least allows us to tinker around with the M3Ds that we've got, and hopefully get something that works. Yeah,
and that'll also give me the opportunity to print it in anything other filaments besides the wood.
Right.
I printed it in the wood because I thought it would look cool. I only had time to print half of one, and mostly because I had one fail, and then I printed it and just said, screw it, I'm going to print another part of it. That's a good call. I really am for that. Let's print it out, and then we can shoot marbles at each other's blocks next episode.
That'd be nice. Yeah. Because it's kind of a cool little concept of a game, and I was looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
So,
and then Diablo.
I think that takes care of it for this week.
It does. I'm Andrew.
I'm Joe, and remember, if you can imagine it, you can print it.